I remember when she was taken, the grief I felt was so deep. I mean, I just wailed alone. I had to like leave and just sobbed, and to have that kind of a bond with someone at a very young age, to see that the fragility of life, that life can come and go, that your health can come and go, that people can be in your life one moment and then gone the next moment. It really kind of reoriented my entire focus to be very much about life is short. Live it, give back, make a difference, serve others, love others well. And I ended up going into nonprofit work myself as a result.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Snaadt. It rhymes with odd, and you're watching and listening to the Rhymes with Odd podcast. Today, we're back with another episode with our interviewee, David Allen Tracy. David is a serial entrepreneur from Des Moines. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
David and I have been connected for a while through many different things now as things have kind of come along, but we've had a couple serial entrepreneurs on as I would categorize you, since you're kind of got your hands in everything. So could you tell just people like on the street, what do you typically introduce yourself as?
I don't even know anymore. I would say that, yes, I am a serial entrepreneur, and that I do own several businesses. I'm always starting new things. People look at me and they go, what is David up to today? Because it's always kind of a random set of things. But I primarily, over the years, have been I own a marketing agency called Northgate Marketing. That has been kind of, for the last, 4 years, 5 years, the bread and butter, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I also own an interior design business called Eastbridge Interiors. I'm a part owner of a travel agency called JLW Travel Group. I'm a personal brand coach, a theta healing practitioner, and I have
you're a keynote speaker
keynote
too.
Speaker.
I have them written down because there's a lot here.
I have a Brand Masters Collective, which is like a mastermind, a membership-based mastermind. I have a podcast, and I have a former YouTube show. So it's a lot of variety of things. So.
Sure. As kind of somebody that also does a lot of different stuff, what's the thing that excites you about doing that? Because I think of like some people that just do one job their whole life. Like what's been the thing that's been fulfilling for you, having so many stakes in the fire?
I think I never really understood it until I met someone named Chelsea Engel. Shout out to her. She's an Enneagram coach. And I learned about my personality in a very fresh way. I think growing up, I was always told, oh, you're a leader, you're this and the other, which is true. I can lead. But I always thought of it from the standpoint of kind of like CEO executive kind of standpoint. I was in nonprofit work previously, always kind of like director role or administrator role. And yet there's this facet of my personality that needs to constantly be creating. I'm very creative, very artistic, but I'm also very like entrepreneurial in the way I think about it. So the Enneagram 7 says their motivation is to never be bored. So that's when I learned that, I'm like, well, that makes sense because I don't want to be bored. And sure. I'm not bored. I get to do a lot of variety of things and constantly be creating new things and meet new people and create new experiences and new possibilities. I think what motivates me is that when you have a series of businesses, the idea is to create a symbiotic ecosystem where each one kind of feeds into the other. It's like the ultimate lead generation. And that's ultimately what I've created, is where through coaching, they might need marketing. They go to Northgate. Or I have an event or a conference in an international country, and now that's JLW. Or they also need interior design for their business. We do that. So it's kind of, feeding each other.
Sure. Well, and having those, I would call them like fun, complementary relationship with the business. It makes your hobbies turn into things that actually make you money, which is helpful too, to keep all the interest there. Like when I look at my life, I'm like, I think I have like 2 things that are considered hobbies because I have this, there has to be a word for it, where you take your hobbies and turn it into a business, because I have that disease.
Oh, I know. And I mean, ultimately, isn't that what you would want? I never want to be in a situation where I'm like, I just work into work. For me, if I'm not excited about what I'm doing, then I don't know why I'm doing it,
Sure.
And that's just, maybe it's a personality thing. I do know people who really like the steady Eddie, the faithful job, the 9 to 5, clock in, clock out. They feel very fulfilled in doing that well, and then going home and having ease of mind. I think my mind never turns off. It's constantly going to my own detriment sometimes, but
Sure. Well, I think you're in the right place for where your personality is. And we'll talk more about that too, because I think the knowing who you are is such a huge piece to doing what you're meant to do, which I think is really big. Before we get into all that fun, deep stuff, though, I think it'd be good to kind of backtrack for people. Can you tell us a little bit about your backstory, like where you grew up and kind of your backstory and your upbringing, which I think is really unique?
Absolutely. And I think in many respects, that's probably why I have the personality I have, because I didn't grow up in one place. I was born in Wisconsin. My parents, we moved to Nova Scotia when I was 5.
It was like Army brat, they just
No,
liked to travel?
My dad wanted to do nonprofit work internationally. So he went to Cambridge University and became an English teacher to work and teach abroad. We did that. Then they did some training in Dallas. Then we went to Mexico, to Toluca. We lived there for almost a year. Then from there, we moved to Florida for almost a year. My parents did some more training, and then we ended up going to Panama for like almost a year, and then to Guatemala for a year, and then to Panama for 25 years. That's where I grew up.
Okay, very cool. Did you have to learn the local language every time you went, or were you just like scraping by? Like when you go to Nova Scotia for less than a year, like what's the local language there?
I mean, in Nova Scotia, they speak English with a very thick Scottish accent.
Okay.
But I was pretty young at that point. Like I do remember it. I remember the lighthouses and the beach and the lobster and that kind of stuff. But I don't remember a ton. Whereas in Mexico, it's interesting because we were like the only Americans there. We were surrounded by Latin Americans, Mexicans rather, so I grew up just being bilingual. I don't ever remember not speaking or think Spanish. I can think and dream in Spanish. I can write very well in both languages, very descriptively. I used to do public speaking in both languages. So Spanish, in some respects, is almost more my heart language than even English. But it's kind of the same, So I think that was huge. And then on top of that, even in Panama, I lived in numerous parts of Panama. So we lived in the interior. So when Panama, in that time, so many people know the history of Panama up to a point. They know the Panama Canal, and no, it was not taken over by the Chinese. And that was the big rumor going around. But the U.S. were stationed there there was over 200,000 troops stationed in the U.S. So there's an area of Panama called the Panama Canal Zone where all the military and Americans lived for the most part. Although I had friends and I went to school for some of my life in that area, so I had a lot of, like you call military brats, friends, and I went to the military bases, we lived rural. So we lived out in the interior of Panama, several hours from the city. I basically grew up in a small town with a little plaza and the Catholic Church as the center, and I would play soccer with the kids. We'd play marbles. We'd play tops, and we'd compete, and we'd take firecrackers and break them apart and make little bombs and like all those kind of things. And that is like, when I describe that to some people, that's like the childhood of people in their 50s, in the 50s in the U.S. Like that's the kind of stuff that kids in many respects would do. And in Panama, it's like behind the times and things. But then eventually we moved towards the city, but actually in the jungle. In the Chagres River area, there are several indigenous tribes, the Embera and the Waunan. My parents started a boarding school for indigenous kids from the Embera and Waunan villages, and also the Buglere and the Tiribe and all of them actually in the Nove. So I lived and grew up amongst indigenous kids most of my adolescence. So we would either go up river to the jungle. This looks like National Geographic, big canopy jungle, beautiful rivers, and you go in and there's huts and people living in the jungle. And many of these kids were like my best friends, like brothers and sisters kind of a level. In fact, my parents actually adopted or almost adopted, because it's very complicated to adopt in Panama, an indigenous girl that we got when she was 15 days old. And I took care of her because I was homeschooled. And at the time, kind of getting ahead of myself, I had cancer. So I was going through chemo and I was recovering from cancer. I had 9 months of chemotherapy, 14, 15.
How old were you when you had got the first diagnosis?
14.
Okay.
And we decided to stay in Panama. And that was a great decision in many respects because there was a lot of contemplation to leave when my parents found out I had cancer. And it was very, it was really good because in many respects, because we stayed, we met Esther, which is my little sister. So I have a brother biological, I have a sister biological, and then I have 2 foster girls, and then I have a little brother that's also in process of being adopted. So there's like 6 of us. But Esther, very, very dear to my heart, because I had no choice but to be homeschooled at that point. I was sick for 5 years from the chemo. I couldn't keep food down. I was skin and bones, weighed 125 pounds. And I was home with her all day long. So I took care of her, fed her, changed her diapers, all the things, and just formed a really close bond. Fast forward a little bit more, the government of Panama is very complicated in how they deal with adoptions, foster care, and so forth. The mother, when she had Esther, was, she was 13, so very young. Mm-hmm. And she turned 18, and someone in the government said, you need to take your daughter back. She took her daughter back, and the government removed this little girl from our home. She only knew English. She only knew us as her family, and then suddenly she's gone. And talk about devastation. So not only had I had these chronic health things for a long time, but then this little girl I formed this bond with very deeply suddenly is gone in the jungle. And when you have those kind of situations, trauma, health issues, people you love ripped from you all of a sudden in a very unjust yet just way. Yes, the mother, but the mother was 13. The mother abandoned her. I understand the complex dynamics of this. I don't condemn the mother, but it was at best for the girl, right? So ultimately, I had to mature really quickly. Let's just put it that way.
Sure. Well, you're like you said, you're raising a young infant child while you're also sick. Like that has to come with a lot of development, like just mentally, emotionally. Like you can't be the person that's in the hospital because you are the hospital. Like you're in the sick bay, but you're also running the nursery because you're helping raise this child. And then to have that person that you basically raised and spent all that time with ripped from you, that's got to be really, really difficult. I can only imagine just the feel of that. Because how old was Esther when she returned back to her mom?
5.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have 4 daughters. Interestingly enough, how things go full circle. I remember when she was taken, how I wasn't a father at that point. She wasn't biologically mine. I was her brother, but it felt deeper than a brother. Mm-hmm. And my parents even said, the bond I had with her was very, very deep. And when she was taken away, I remember the grief I felt was so deep. I mean, I just wailed and alone. I had to leave and just sobbed, and to have that kind of a bond with someone at a very young age, to see that the fragility of life, that life can come and go, that your health can come and go, that people can be in your life one moment and then gone the next moment. It really kind of reoriented my entire focus to be very much about life is short. Live it, give back, make a difference, serve others, love others well. And I ended up going into nonprofit work myself as a result. I traveled over 40 countries in that process. I did everything from earthquake relief, flood relief, medical brigades, orphanage care, urban development. We ran a grade school, bunch of different things.
It was like the Red Cross or something similar to that?
Not the Red Cross. It was a nonprofit organization called Youth with a Mission.
Okay.
So it's in over 196 countries.
Okay.
So very much part of who I am, very much an element of the culture that I have. I've been involved, as you know, numerous factors, very cross-culturally, even here in Iowa. I was, for a season, the VP for DEI. My approach on DEI is very different than I think many people's perspectives on it. I don't believe in a top-down change. I believe in an integration of change of culture. It takes more time, but it's the idea of now loving your neighbor, knowing your neighbor, getting to appreciate them, learn from them, and again create that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Well, in DEI for you, it's not just what you look like. It's more like looking at you, you're like, oh, you're from Iowa, cool, whatever. But it's like the depth of cultural exposure you've had across the whole world your whole life. Like it's deeper than what you look like and present to the world. It's like it's in your bones. It's how you are. It's what you eat. It's how you talk. It's all those things. So that's a super cool perspective to bring to it.
Yeah. No, and I can't. That's just kind of like anybody, and this is one thing about identity and culture. Anybody, you can't be who you aren't. You are who you are. Part of who you are is the fabric of your environment. And you can choose to change your environment. You can choose, and culture is such an evolving thing. And that's one thing I've always been very clear is like someone creates a certain genre of music. It's, that's from that culture. It's embraced by that culture. But then other people hear that music and they're like, I like that. But then they take it and they adapt it to their own culture. And then someone else takes it and, it keeps evolving and you end up with like rock and roll to rock to hard rock to, and it just keeps, you get my point.
Well, and it's some people state claim on like, unless you live in a rural area, you can't listen to country, or unless you're black, you can't listen to rap music. It's like people try to put these gates on it. It's like, it's a melting pot. The world is everything can ebb and flow and move. And I think that's the interesting thing, because if that approach was taken, then it's like, well, then jazz wouldn't have evolved to what is hip hop music now. Because if it would just like, oh, it's just only these people play this type. It's like, no, it's all, anyone can enjoy it. And if you can tap your foot to it,
I know.
enjoy it. It's like it's part of that whole experience.
It is. And I think the biggest compliment to any culture is when someone else takes it and adopts it as their own or evolves. It evolves. Culture is kind of like bacteria. The culture, a bacteria culture, you put it in the right environment and it's going to multiply. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing about culture, brand identity, any iconic brand, any iconic movement, anything that is going to have to permeate culture. It means something. It's important to a vast majority of people. And there are certain nuances and reasons why that is, usually based in values and the expression of those values in a creative way that stands out. And so I think it kind of only is natural that even though I was in international nonprofit work for most of my life, that eventually I ended up in marketing. Because if you want to create waves or create movements, you want to make noise, you want it to last and make an impact, you got to market it right, and that all begins with branding, start at the source. I got into marketing because there was a certain point in my life, and I need to unbutton because I'm like really tight.
Sure, no worries.
Wardrobe malfunction here. But I'm like trying to breathe, and I'm like, there, that's better. But basically, I had grown up in that, right, my whole life. It was what I knew. I didn't have any like patriotic loyalty to one country or another. It wasn't like Panama or the U.S. It was kind of both, but not either in some respects too. But the environment of the nonprofit I grew up in was really, in many respects, the identity that I had. But within that was like, well, I want to push the boundaries. I want to do something else. And I was in a very discontent place at one point. At that point, I had run a nonprofit in Panama for 5 years. Then we moved to Hawaii, lived there for a couple of years, and I was involved with another location. And after 2 years of it, I was like, this is good, but it's not great. There's something missing here. I didn't know quite what it was. I ended up getting found by a businessman who is a Korean businessman living in Virginia. He said, I think you have a lot of business potential. I had another man who was the VP for Toyota in Panama. He said to me, David, you're in the wrong career. Like, you're an entrepreneur. You need to be doing entrepreneurship. I had several people kind of affirm that. So the wheels were turning. But I was so loyal to the nonprofit work that I would have never left, except that I got diagnosed with liver cancer. So again,
is it second time? Same organ?
Different organ.
Different organ, okay.
And different type of cancer, unrelated. I'm like, seriously? And so suddenly we find ourselves having to go to Mayo Clinic, Minnesota, leave everything very, very abruptly, very drastically, went through surgery, and I'm fine. that's a whole other story, which I don't even know if I want to go into all of it. But
Sure.
but basically, it transitioned me. I think oftentimes when we go through difficult situations, we have a choice to make. This is either my lot in life or it's an opportunity. And there has to be an adapting that happens anytime you have any type of traumatic experience, because there has to be a new normal. Now, the new normal can be under the weight of trauma, or it can be looked at as what gift have I been given now? And in this situation, I'm like, well, we left everything. I'm no longer part of the nonprofit. Now what? So this businessman approached me again, and I ended up working with him as his director of operations for his mobile app company. Helped him bring it to Panama, got that going. Eventually, he's like, "You're so good at marketing. We should start a marketing agency." Did that with him and his company for almost a year. Eventually, I transitioned out and started my own. There was a lot of reasons why that happened. Namely, though, we moved to Iowa December of 2019, not knowing the pandemic was coming.
Sure. Great time to move.
And start a business. And if we had stayed in Panama went through such an intense lockdown. I mean, I'm talking like one of the most intense in the world, where you were not allowed out of your home except for twice a week based on your ID number for a couple-hour period, men on one day, women on other days.
Oh, my gosh.
You weren't allowed to walk your dog. You weren't allowed to exercise or take a walk outside. They would arrest you.
How is that legal there? Or anywhere, really? That's insane.
It's really wrong, in my opinion.
Sure.
But that's what the government did. And so a lot of people left Panama. Business really struggled. And then to this day, because of that choice, the country is really struggling. If I had stayed there, we would have been in a really bad situation. So we left right in the perfect timing and came to Iowa to be closer to my wife's family. I'd met my wife in Panama in 2009. We immediately, after we got married, we were in nonprofit work. We had kids really quick. By the time I had the cancer, the second time, I had 4 daughters. So in all that time, I had never spent time with her side of the family. She'd always been with my side. So we kind of moved here to be close to the family. And I didn't have any real sense or intention that I was going to live in Iowa long term. At first we thought, we'll just kind of be here for a bit and see how it goes, But then I had this business idea for marketing, Northgate Marketing. And it's called Northgate because it's helping people find their true north, the gateway to the north. That's what I mean. So ultimately, what direction – the North Star is the direction that sailors and so on and so forth. But so often people can't see the star. They have things blocking it. So the whole idea is to open the doors so they can actually see the star. And we did marketing. And so I hired a lot of people from the nonprofit realm that I had been involved in previously, people from all around the world and the U.S. And I had a team of about 12 people, 8 of whom were employees. And it was awesome. We did great work for a long time. And it was really fun and really exciting. And we were growing. In less than a year, we had clients in 4 continents and like 25 states. It was just taken off. I loved it. But at that point, I was still functioning. And for those of you who don't know what the Enneagram is, again, I'm going to refer to it, but look it up. If you want to have your typing session, look up Elite Enneagram Coaching. Chelsea Engel will set you up. But I always was told I was an 8. And when I had done the test, I was an 8, which is this kind of CEO, and their primary motivation is to be in control or in charge. That's not really who I am. I've had to be through numerous situations, traumatic or otherwise, that way. When I was in Haiti in 2010, after the earthquake, I had to really execute in that kind of a way because there's natural disaster, there's domestic violence and theft and danger. But true to form, that's not me. And with Northgate, that was kind of how I formed it. It was this kind of structure that was, in many respects, although a marketing agency, it was like a nonprofit.
Yeah.
We did a lot of work for nonprofits. So eventually, a lot of things happened at once. I was burning out because here I was doing SEO and Google ad management and Google Analytics and, all the things that
video production, photography, design, all the different
things.
Everything that you can think of. Yeah.
And, had a whole team. And then economically, there was a little bit of a recession beginning at that point. And then also AI technology started to surface and things had to be adapted. And my health started to deteriorate because although I don't have cancer, because I've been through I've had numerous health conditions beyond cancer even, my health is like very kind of fragile. It always has been. If I push myself a little too hard, although I say that and I'm running 5 companies, but if I push myself too hard, like it can just go poop, you're done.
If your stress levels exceed a certain RPM, it'll just tank.
Tank.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I'm like, I have no energy. I can't keep up. This is crazy. I'm not happy.
What was the side effect of that? Was it more like couldn't get out of bed, like depression, brain fog, or what was kind of the thing that was making you feel like I've bitten off too much that I can't chew?
I don't even know if it was that it was too much that I can't chew as much as who am I?
Okay.
I think that was the crisis. Who am I? And I think that is why, in many respects, I have chosen to become a personal brand coach because identity, if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going. That is true from a marketing standpoint. That's true from any standpoint. My thing was that I didn't know who I was if I wasn't serving sacrificially. My whole life in the nonprofit, great work, great people, great organizations I was involved with. But the whole point is you're helping others, helping others, helping others. So that was my whole motivation. Help others, make a difference, be philanthropic, give. And the whole notion of self-care, taking care of yourself, putting that oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on someone else was very hard for me to comprehend. It's very hard for me to comprehend in many respects. I think in part, I had also never really dealt with the trauma from childhood. So I had numerous things, which I won't go into all of them, but even just that one or two, the cancer and my little sister getting taken away, very traumatic kind of experiences. And my whole adolescence was kind of interrupted. I'd never really sought help, counseling, therapy, none of that. Just kind of pushed it, swept it under the rug and moved on. And I masked the pain through work, keeping busy, and not acknowledging it ultimately.
Which can be a drug in itself. It's like a productive drug, but in a way, like you said, just bury it with whatever it is. Something that could be thought as a good thing could also be something that could make it so it's another barrier to getting to the happiness that you can be in life. So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, the biggest thing that happens when we have any type of traumatic experience is there's a vicious cycle, and it's of shame, fear, and control. Any type of traumatic experience you go through, you're going to, even though you might not identify it as this, you feel shame. And why is it shame? We feel shame. The feeling of shame is oftentimes thought more of as if you're ridiculed or made fun of. That's not the only form of shame. Shame is when you feel like you've lost control, when you're vulnerable, when you're exposed, when you can't do anything, when you're helpless, you feel shame. And so anytime anything happens and, something happens, like if something happens to someone you love and you weren't able to protect them, you feel powerless. You feel like you can't do it. And then all of a sudden you go introspective. You go, I'm inadequate, or I can't, or I'm weak, or whatever it would be. We're afraid of that shame. We're afraid of that feeling. It's it's the feeling that all human beings hate. So we're afraid of it. We're afraid of being in that situation. So we try to control it. We control it through 3 ways. Either 1, superiority. I'm going to be the strong man or woman. No one's ever going to be allowed in. I'm never going to allow this thing to happen again.
Build some walls and keep the bad people out type of thing.
Which is why everybody talks about boundaries. And I get it. I have my own views on boundaries. But building walls, protecting yourself. Or it's inferiority. I need to blend into the wallpaper. I need to disappear. Don't pay attention to me. I'm too shameful to look at. Or it's a coping mechanism. And that usually is in the form of some form of addiction. That addiction may be drugs, porn, alcohol, partying, work, right. You name it. Mm-hmm. For me, it was work.
Sure.
Because that's what I did my whole life. That and that's fine as long as anything can become unhealthy in excess if your values aren't in the right alignment. So I got to this point where what if I wasn't giving back all the time? What if I wasn't, who am I? And I didn't know. And thankfully at that point, I had a client who is a certified theta healing practitioner who happened to become a client at that point for me. And she just had this whole ethos that was very different than anything I'd heard. And I'm one of these people who's pretty open-minded, learning things, but I'd never really thought about some things she had said. So as I was doing marketing for her and consulting for marketing, I started to learn a lot of things about myself to the point where I'm like, wow, I was like going this whole direction. And I'm like gaining all these things, but I'm not getting anything. So basically I went through some theta healing with her. And theta healing is a modality of inner healing that breaks patterns that you have. So all of us have the theta brainwave is when the place that you're in when you're falling asleep, you're aware that you're falling asleep, you are kind of in the dream realm, but not quite. So it's when you wake up and you are aware that you're waking up, but you can still dream. It's also where children are between the age of 2 or 3 and 6 and 7-ish. Everything's the theta brainwave at that point. So
it's like anything's possible. Your dreams are attainable. No matter, like, it's kind of that brain space where like rationality hasn't hit you, and you can just dream of anything and you can accomplish.
Santa Claus is real.
Yeah, you're Superman. You can do anything. Yeah.
And so you don't have the fear.
Yep.
The fear is not there. The shame's not there because my daughters, when they were that age, they believed anything we said. They believed they could do anything, and then things happen and the brainwave shifts, and then suddenly we start to become more like an adult.
Sure.
Right? Which is rationalizing everything, as you said.
Growing up, the sad reality of growing up.
Mm-hmm. And we do need to. But the theta brainwave is there as a gift as well. It's the way our brain is wired to actually heal trauma, to process it creatively. If we look at trauma in any shape or form, trauma is in many respects a blueprint or a construction that we did to protect ourselves. So we have to feel the trauma, because if we weren't able to, we'd just be a robot. So any traumatic thing happens, yes, we feel emotions. We feel the shame, we feel the hurt, we feel the pain. So we try to construct something to protect it. That's very normal behavior. Now, the problem is that in a traumatic situation, anything that's done rushed or quickly is going to create this construct that might not have good foundations or even based in truth or reality. So to go back, it requires us to deconstruct or to unravel things that we always believed to be true, because these things become pillars or patterns. If you look at it like a weaving of a rug or a tapestry, each thread produces a pattern, and that pattern will continue producing so long as you keep it going that way. What if you disrupted it? It would disrupt the pattern and change the trajectory, or you remove one color.
And the life that is your tapestry looks a lot different when you're on your deathbed. It's well, I was making this, and now, like,
what matters?
Now it's like back up, and holy crap, this has changed my whole life just by course correcting a little bit. I know on the last podcast we had Kyler Case on, and he had mentioned there's a book, I can't remember what it is, but it's basically a plane could change course by 1 degree, and they end up hundreds of miles off course.
Yes, in
a good way or a bad way. You can course correct at any point in your life journey, and it can completely change where you end up, which is super cool.
Absolutely, and that's 100% true. Little choices can have big consequences. Ideas have consequences. And so there's worldviews that are formed mainly in our childhood, but it can happen in other experiences in life as well. We do change. Trauma changes us regardless, whether you want it to or not. Any type of situation that's traumatic changes your brain. It can change personalities even, which is insane. So I went through a lot of redefining, a lot of repatterning, a lot of reshaping. and came out of it like, whoa. And then on top of that, I did the Enneagram, which was pretty big. And I did some of my own stuff to the level where I actually became a certified theta healing practitioner myself, which marketing, theta healing,
Sure.
why? But it's because it's crazy for me in that we all have energy, we all have abilities, we all have talent, but if we put it in you put the wrong outlet in the wrong device, it's not going to power it. It's going to zap. So it's all about knowing that you do have potential, you do have energy, you do have this source of, you do have this ability to charge whatever the device is, but you have to fit it in the right one. So many of us are doing things that we were told to do by others, or that a certain expectation that that's who you are, certain statements, especially from our parents. It could be teachers, pastor, it could be any number of people. You are this. And the first time that happens is with our name. We're named something, and that kind of puts an identity on us. But every time we're told as a child we are something, it forms a fragment or a thread of our identity. And sometimes it's based in reality and sometimes it's not. If you had an abusive parent, which I didn't, but if you had an abusive parent, and they're like, you're no good for nothing, and you hear that enough times as a kid, you're going to believe you're no good for nothing. And to reshape that reality, because it's not based in truth, it's not based in reality, it's based on an opinion of others that you believe so wholeheartedly is who you are, how do you change that? Well, when you can change that, then it changes everything else by default. So yes, marketing is all about presenting a brand in a compelling way that gives you leads, that brings people to you. You can talk about frequencies. You're putting out a frequency, and different people have different satellites and go, I got it, and they'll be drawn to you. They'll receive your frequency. We all know that our frequency isn't for everybody. Who you are is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. That's okay. But there are some people who desperately need your services or want your services or would enjoy it. And so the idea then is, if you know who you are and you know what you love and you know what you enjoy and you can express yourself authentically, and the whole element of authenticity is to understand the author. It's a very similar root word. When you know yourself so well that you know the author, you know who's written your book. Okay, so there's many components of that. That's knowing yourself. Could be God, could be your parents, could be your environment. Understanding your origins, understanding all that. Then who's writing the story once you know the author? Because otherwise we just let it get written for us. So that's
which you see that a lot of people that they're in a job they don't necessarily enjoy, or they're married to someone they don't necessarily enjoy, or they're living somewhere they don't enjoy. And it's like, no one's ever asked them why. Why are you doing this? Well, my parents said this is a good place to live, or my wife was the only person that I felt like, it's like whatever, like you make all these excuses for the life that you have. And that makes a whole lot of sense.
It does. And sometimes you can change it. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you make choices and you're like, man, I'm stuck. But then by reorienting it and restructuring it, you're able to actually improve, build on it. So trauma that's healed provides transformation, it provides revelation, it provides freedom. So even if you're in a situation where you mentioned marriage, you're in if anyone listening or watching is in a marriage, I'm unhappy in my marriage. Heal your trauma. Don't try to heal your spouse.
Heal yourself.
Heal yourself. Mm-hmm. Do that. You'll find that your spouse is going to respond. Okay, I'm not promising that, but we know that whenever we do something, we're flowing in abundance, others around us will be receptors of that as well. Mm-hmm. And then with the whole author and then authenticity. So whenever you look at people who are truly authentic, almost always there's an element of trust. There's no walls up. They're sincere. They're real. They're not fake. This isn't a facade. I think we have a harder time recognizing and discerning that nowadays because of how much fake stuff we see all the time on social media. But what it ultimately is, authenticity builds authority. So suddenly authority, again, same root word, I have authority when I know my rights, when I know my gifts, when I know what I'm good at, when I know my place, when I know what I can do. I can walk in with confidence then. It's not overcompensation. It's not superiority. It's none of that. It is simply like you do video production. You don't have to know or wonder how to use the equipment in this room. You know how to do it. You've been doing this for years. There's new technologies. You learn them. You learn about AI. You adapt to learn for editing with AI. Whatever it be, you become an authority in your area. We always know that to continue to be an authority, we constantly need to be growing and learning. It never is static. Anytime we remain static, we become a cesspool. So we got to keep flowing and growing. So that has become kind of my brand narrative per se. So people follow me on social media, they're going to hear me talking this kind of stuff all the time. And I even put out a reel yesterday whenever this releases, but whatever. I put it out yesterday about why I talk so much about trauma when we're relating to personal branding and marketing. And I'm like, because who do you want speaking? Your traumatic self or your authentic self? And what's going to bring people in? And, it's crazy how much people can change. People looked at me even a year ago. I was the same person, just carrying a lot more trauma.
Sure. So to pause on the theta healing stuff, because we could go real deep even more than we have. Talk to me about how you had this kind of come into yourself moment of like, what am I doing? What changes did you make in your life to get past the trauma and it changed your whole trajectory of your business and what you're doing professionally now?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing is whenever you identify the pattern and you do restore it and you bring it, it's going to recreate new patterns. And suddenly you're like, that doesn't fit anymore. That shoe does not fit anymore. So it was very clear to me that although I do marketing and we still have a great agency, I don't have employees anymore. Full transparency. I have contractors. They're the same people that were my employees previously. Love them. But I realized that for me as an Enneagram 7, which needs freedom, I didn't want to be bound to having employees anymore. I wanted to have the freedom to keep growing and creating and evolving and adapting and to create new opportunities. So that was really key. The second thing was I realized that although under the umbrella of Northgate Marketing, we do all these services, I'm like, you know what? That's great. I have people who can do them. I don't need to do it all. One of the case in point is you.
Sure.
Video production. I don't need a video production department anymore because there's people who do it really well, like Ryan Snaadt. Why wouldn't I do that? That's a no-brainer. Like I don't need that responsibility when I can outsource. So we've been doing that pretty repeatedly. Same with photography, same with websites, all of it. Obviously, I'm still involved. I'm still helping strategically. I'm still doing sales. I'm giving marketing advice. Mm-hmm. But I've since funneled my energy and attention more towards what my passion is, and that's people, one-on-one. It's the ability to hear their story, to hear what their desires are, their aspirations, and then kind of pull out the Swiss Army knife of, okay, you're starting a business, been there, done that, 5 businesses at this point. You want to become an influencer, whatever category you are. I've worked with Grammy Award-winning singers. I've worked with models. I've worked with keynote speakers. I've worked with entrepreneurs, with authors. And I've worked in 25 distinct types of industries at this point. And I've worked and traveled internationally. So I can kind of understand a little bit enough of each kind of industry to have enough experience. I do my own research, of course. I evaluate their competitors. But ultimately, what I usually find is that if they understand who they are in their service, they also should have a better understanding of their brand persona and those people out there who are going to go, yes, that's for me. We live in a buffet society, so there are way too many options nowadays for any type of service. You can get any number of things in any category. Whether you want to work locally or internationally with whatever, online or virtual or in person, there's just the saturation. But what people are looking for nowadays more than anything, because of that oversaturation, is we're kind of tired. Most people are kind of tired of anything impersonal. I think 2020 forward, the biggest thing people are craving is authentic relationships and community. And even with brands that they adhere to, businesses that they work with, there's a reason people go local oftentimes. There's that sense of local community. Or if it isn't a local it's because it resonates with something that they have as a felt need or desire. So I'm trying to help my clients untap that. But then how that manifests. So I changed my trajectory. I thought, you know what? Under Northgate umbrella, I set up a DBA, which is David Allen Tracy Personal Brand Coach. And basically that one is me as a coach. Mm-hmm. And that realm, I found that for me, that was a very happy place. Northgate is great, still doing it. But the personal brand coaching for me, I have a logo, which is a harpy eagle, which is the national bird of Panama. And it represents soaring on eagle's wings or being free to soar, unleash. Because when you can find your wings and actually fly them, then sky's the limit.
Sure.
So I'd help people with marketing direction, business startups, scaling strategies, personal styling, which is very odd. Again, this theta healing, marketing, talking, personal styling.
Sure.
But again, brand identity.
Sure.
So we often talk about logos for marketing, branding for marketing. Well, your clothing is your brand. It's more than that. We know it's your personality and who you are and all the things. Mm-hmm. Your services, first impressions. People determine who you are usually first impression within a couple seconds of seeing you.
Sure.
It will take up to 20 times to change that first impression once they had one. And they'll usually, so like right today, this didn't fit, but because I'm sitting.
He has a vest and a rose printed dress shirt if you're listening.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm like, and that is kind of me. I'm kind of eclectic. I'll kind of don't like being put in a box even with what I dress, right? But usually it's going to have some color and some pattern or something. Because people look at it and they go, this isn't just a polo shirt guy. Mm-hmm. What's up with him? He's different, especially here in Iowa.
Sure. Did you when you went through your journey, when you were going through the changes with Northgate, is that when you reevaluated your personal brand and was like, who am I now? Is that kind of what led to you where your current style is now? Yeah,
because for a while there, I was pretty much known as the guy who wore the black polo shirt. I mean, that's all I wore.
Whenever I saw you those years before, I think you always wore a black polo shirt.
That's all I had in my closet. Black polos, black T-shirts. That's it. And it was safe. For many years, in my teenage years and young adult years, I did like styling and fashion. I actually organized fashion runway shows. I had done those kind of things. I had worked with, again, like Grammy award-winning singers and went on tour. And the whole element of clothing, red carpet, book signings, on stage, off stage, photo ops and shoots, that was a world I knew and understood. But for myself, I went through numerous phases, as we all do, as teenagers and a young adult. And eventually I was kind of just told, stop that, wear this. And that was what was acceptable. And of course, I was in a nonprofit. So I just went for that. Mm-hmm. For my style, whether it be I think clothing is an expression of your personality. For me, my tribal roots, having grown up in Panama amongst indigenous tribes, lived internationally, lived in Latin America, color, pattern, jewelry, accessories, leather compared to like whatever, all that stuff is all part of who I am.
Sure.
But the other thing about it is this: as an Enneagram 7, I never want to be put in a box. So I'm going to be kind of crazy with whatever I do, right? Now we all have color palettes and all the things. That's the whole thing. So I became a personal stylist as well. And I've helped so many people with that component, literally helping them with their colors, their style, defining it, even personal shopping for them. Sure. Kind of random. But then it goes right in line with the photo shoot and the video production, whatever else. And it's kind of interesting. So you recently did a video for me that I've been using for lead generation. And I got to say, like, that video paired up with the lead generation that we're doing, it drew exactly who I was looking for.
Oh, perfect.
So
we haven't talked about this yet, so that's great to hear.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have put out this lead. I've gotten initial consults with people in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Scotland, the U.S.
Fantastic.
All over the place. And what was interesting was you chose African music.
We need to talk about this because for this video, I was going through music and I'm like, this isn't your typical corporate thing. I'm like, David's a unique guy. I'm like, he's worldly. He's got like this kind of, again, like you said, your personal style, who you are, your personal brand. I'm like, so I was digging through music and I found that song. I'm like, this might just be kind of different enough where he might like it. So I'm glad that seems to stick out to you.
No, I love it. And, and, at that point, I don't think you knew my logo or anything either, or maybe you did, but I forget. But the logo is this harpy eagle with kind of a tribal motif. Then the music you chose was this African, which I have this huge experiences, positive experiences in Africa. I just love Africa. And then I also wore for that, I had a couple outfits I wore. One was a black Chinese silk shirt. And I lived in Chinatown in Panama for a while as well. 14% of the population is from China. Another one I wore was a local artist in Iowa City. She's Native American. She's amazing jewelry designer. Been featured in Fashion Week at Paris. Alicia Velasquez, a house of Don Clichy. Look her up if you are in Iowa. But I was wearing her necklaces for that. And then other ones I wear Panama stuff and just different things. So all of a sudden, the people who are resonating to me go, I was really drawn to kind of your kind of eclectic, kind of tribal, kind of this and the other. And you were just different than what I saw, because if you look at most coaches online.
Black turtleneck.
Boring
looking.
Maybe a suit tie, maybe just a polo or, a T-shirt with a blazer. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But you have to describe your tribe. That's what I always say. My tribe are the people who are trying to – for people who are going to hire a personal brand coach, it's the people who want to stand out. So, again, that buffet society, you eat with your eyes first. So if I'm going through the buffet line and I see, mashed potatoes that look like they've been kind of dried out and gross, I might not go for that. But if I see the charcuterie tower, all with meats and cheeses and olives all around it, and it's like piled up, and I'm like, I'm going to probably go there first.
Sure.
Not saying the mashed potatoes aren't good. They might even be the best mashed potatoes in the world, but they don't look the most presentable. So the idea is to find your secret sauce, your it factor, the thing that makes you, you. Everybody has it. There's not one person, and I truly believe this, there's not one person in the world who's less exciting or more exciting. Everybody has an exciting factor about them. The ones we see the most, though, are the ones who knew how to market it. So
isn't that the truth, though? You see people on like big social media influencers or celebrities, and it's like some of these people don't look like much, and then you hear them open their mouth and they start singing, and you're like, okay, that's their thing. They got that it factor. But how many people can sing like that just didn't know how to market themselves to get a record deal or to get found or noticed? Like there's people like that everywhere. Just a matter of like how you present yourself and how you get opportunities.
100%. And there's an art to that. And in the Brand Masters Collective, my platform for basically weekly teaching on personal branding, that's what we talk about. You have to find – everybody's got an art. There's an art to whatever you do well, right? So there's an art to your video production. There's an art to even a construction person, or no matter doctors. There's an art form to it. Art, to me, is the committed, dedicated, continuous form of improving oneself for it to be appreciated by the world. Any artist who's worth their anything is that's iconic. You can see for miles away, oh, that's a Picasso, or that's a whatever, Monet.
Sure.
Or you hear a certain beat or song, you kind of know who it is, or their voice, or whatever it be. So there's a level of consistency and commitment and dedication and a practice to improving oneself. But it's so important to know what your secret sauce is first. So.
No, I love that. Well, it's interesting you mentioned the clothing, because when I was younger, this is like probably 5-6 years ago, I did quite a few other state speaking opportunities. And I was like, okay, what am I going to wear? Because it's like, one of them was a fitness conference for gym owners. So there's like hundreds of gym owners. I was going to talk about video marketing for gyms. I was like, what do I wear? So I decided I was going to wear a suit. I'm like, no, this is stupid. So I ended up wearing like denim jacket with matching denim pants. I love Chelsea boots. I have like 7 or 8 pair of them. So I wore some Chelsea boots, get up on stage. I had everyone like locked into me because all these people wore polo and jogger pants, like the entire conference is these people. And they're like, who is this man up here with this like different outfit on? I had a line of 20 people that came up to me and talked to me about my presentation. They loved what I was talking about, but they're like, dude, I was engaged just because I loved your getup. Like, you're just like, I could tell this person had like some character and was not just this dry, boring, like you said, the black t-shirt type of person. Like you have something going on. It's super interesting. And it's like, that's going to be the first impression, even if they didn't listen to my presentation. If they walked by, had a couple of people walk by my room, look in, and then kind of saw the people and wandered in, it's like you never know how that's going to affect things, which is super cool.
But the thing about that was you were wearing clothes you liked as well, and those boots that you really liked, right? So you weren't like, I'm just going to do this to fit in or to look like a certain way. This is who you are.
Sure.
You picked the right one for the right environment. We all have different facets. We're like diamonds. We have different facets we can do for different occasions. And you can tell. You can tell when someone's trying to be something that they're not, whether that be the form that they dress or the way they talk or their swagger or whatever. You know, they're standing there with their sunglasses on, they're, you know, on the stage and, you know, and you're like, some of them, you're like, that's who they are. And some of the ones you're like, you're really trying to be someone that you're not.
Sure.
And,
you're a poser, you know.
Yeah. And there's a big difference. And there's a fine line to that. The biggest thing is, are you comfortable in that?
Sure.
You know, because being on stage speaking is very uncomfortable for some people. I want to be as comfortable as possible when I'm up there, feeling like I'm myself, but also standing out in the right way.
Sure.
Because sometimes your wardrobe or what you do to stand out can actually repel people rather than bring them in. So in your case, you have the right balance.
Sure.
So
when I've talked to some people, I had a city planner come in here and talk with me recently, and they were in a suit and tie environment their whole professional career. They come to a smaller town in Iowa. They're a city planner. All their constituents are farmers. And they had a sports car, sold the sports car, got a freaking pickup 350 Super Duty, wore cowboy boots. Like they had those things in their closet. They're afraid to look that way because of the perception. But when you dress to fit your ideal audience, it attracts those people. It's like, oh, you're supposed to be some big wig planner or like a suit and tie guy from the bank, but you're like dressed like me and you talk like me. Now I'm like, now we can do business like that. I think that's the thing that cuts through the noise, which I think is cool. And on that style side, I think it's interesting because like I'm 29, so I'm turning 30 this year, and I'm kind of going through this style thing for myself where like things I wore in high school and college don't fit. I don't want to wear things that I wore when I was 18. When I'm 30, I'm a father of two now. I own a business. Like, who am I in the style world? Like, what do I want to wear? So I've been kind of going through this with myself too, of like, kind of just looking at Pinterest or Instagram or looking at like what things excite me or things that are in my closet that I don't like, get rid of. I think it's an interesting way to like, how do you present to the world? Because it's such a huge factor of it. So
it really is. It really is. And you're never static. People can change their style. Personalities change too. So different seasons of life, of course, you have to adapt to the times. There's some things that are not fashionable anymore. No matter how much you try to do them, they're just never going to work.
Sure.
And then sometimes they come back. So you need to be authentic, express yourself freely, but also understand what's going to resonate with your target market. And so it's anything like personal branding. I can't put you in a box. You can't put me in a box. That's not what a personality test is. Ultimately, it's meant to liberate you, to free you up, give you options, to know how to really hone in on where you're going to go and maximize that potential, as opposed to just letting others determine it for you, because you have a personal brand whether you realize it or not. And you can either determine that or others will determine it for you. So
God, I love that. That's so great. Okay, we'll pause on this stuff because we can go really deep on this. I'm going to take a break from this so we can go into the lightning round here.
Okay.
So just wanted to ask some quick off-the-cuff questions. You can answer one word or sentence, or you can go deeper. There's no rules here. You can invent whichever you want to do.
Kind of nervous now.
All right. So I know you're a big foodie. I'd love if you could tell me your favorite Asian restaurant in Des Moines.
Lucky Lotus.
Okay, there you go.
Hands down.
What do you like to get there dish-wise?
The Bing, what can I think of it? The Bing Bing wrap.
Okay.
The Bing Bing wrap is on fire. That thing is amazing.
It's like a sushi wrap or a...
No, it's like a scallion pancake. Sounds
okay.
And then it's like a pita almost, but it's got, you can do meat or vegetarian, but then it has pickled daikon, pickled carrots and cilantro, I think a cucumber. And then I have this amazing sauce on it and then Kewpie mayo from Japan and hoisin and different things. And it is so good.
Okay.
I love that. It's like ultimate comfort food right there.
I'll have to put that on my list. I love trying new food. I did study abroad and my trip was basically eating food. That was the whole, and I was like so happy. So we were in London. I had supper or lunch 3 times. So that was
I'm sure.
So in terms of that, like, I mean, you try different types of restaurants. What's been like the wildest dish you've tried when you've been traveling? Like, have you eaten snake or eel or something? Like, what's something that jumps out as the craziest dish you've tried?
Probably the weirdest one I ever had was, okay, so I was in an indigenous village in Panama, and they served me armadillo to eat.
Like the shell?
Like the whole armadillo. And
It's kind of hard.
Well, the shell was not what we ate, but we
Okay.
ate the flesh. And here we are eating. It tastes like chicken, of course. And I'm eating that, and all of a sudden they go, here, and they bring me the baby armadillo. They killed the mom.
Why?
And so I'm sitting there with the baby eating her mother, and I'm like, this is sacrilege. This is wrong.
Oh, the baby was alive. Like,
Yes.
that's terrible.
It's so sad. So that was probably up there for weird food experience for me.
Sure. Yeah. When I was in Europe, I tried, we had duck, rabbit, like not the crazy stuff. Like, I had other things before, like smaller things, but I'm always game to try stuff. So that's super interesting. Armadillo. Never thought of that. Of all the places you visited, what's like your top 1 or 2 places that people have to visit if it's like a vacation? Like, what's your favorite vacation spot to go and you have to try it out?
I love Singapore. I preach Singapore all the time, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So if you've never been to Asia is kind of intimidating for a lot of people because it's Asia. It's like very different than the U.S., right? But Singapore, they speak English. They are multicultural. You have Chinese, you have Thai, you have Malaysian, Indian, and the food is a reflection of all that as well. So talk about flavor. Talk about all the best of many components put together. On top of that, it's one of the most expensive countries in the world. I think it was the most expensive. And many of you probably have seen Crazy Rich Asians. The skyscrapers, the infrastructure, the technology is so elevated. It feels like you walked into Star Trek. But then you also feel like you walked into Avatar, the blue people Avatar.
Not the Airbenders.
Yeah, not the Airbenders.
Okay.
Where the rainforest and the trees are literally growing out of the buildings, and the vines and orchids just blooming everywhere. And it's beautiful, and it's very orderly. It's very clean. You're not allowed to litter. You can't spit on the ground. They have like a line for taxis. You don't just, everything's very clean. I really, really like Singapore. The second would be Norway for me. Norway is magical.
Yeah.
Like magical.
I had a friend visit there, and he showed me some of the drone footage from starts with an L. I can't think of like Lufkin maybe.
No idea.
But like literally looks like you're on another planet.
It really
So
the
pretty.
fjords and the culture and the people, they're beautiful and kind, and the food is just fresh seafood and not seafood like you would imagine it, but just clean and the sandwiches, and oh my goodness, it's just so good.
Sure. I'm sure that's probably the hardest question I'll ask you all day is like, of all the 40 countries you've been to, what's the best one to go?
I like all of them. The hardest one I've ever been to was Haiti, hands down.
Sure.
I have no desire to return.
Sure. Well, especially if you went during the storms and stuff. That's crazy. Another question here. We talked about personal styling. I feel like men get a really bad rap for like not dressing properly or to the extent they should. What are like 3 easier style tips for men that you've found with working and coaching with people that men make the same mistakes over and over again? What are some of the things that come to your mind that people are making mistakes for?
So I think most men there's kind of okay, so first of all, a lot of men don't care, number one. That's okay. A lot of men don't want to stand out. They just kind of want to blend in. That's fine too. I think it's more to understand that, okay, there was a time period, and that history has changed so much, right, where men dressed very fashionably. You look at all historical paintings of people, they dressed very elaborately.
Men put a suit on to go to the bathroom in the outhouse just in case they ran into somebody between the house and the outhouse. You have a suit and a bowler hat on or something.
So, that all kind of changed probably in the 60s, 70s rather. It started to change because before that, men were in suits all the time. And before that, of course, if you look even at the Renaissance or you look at, pictures of France and Louis, whatever the number it was, and, men dressed very fancy. It's changed a lot to this kind of practical, and that's normal because men, culturally rather, over the time, men were outdoors working and hard working and sweating and whatever. But now with technology and a lot of people working a desk job and all the things. I think there's more options. So again, it comes down to your personality. What I will say is accessorizing is cool. So whether that be a necklace or a bracelet or the handkerchief in your blazer or a belt buckle or whatever it is, do that. That's just something, a little bit of flair is not going to hurt you.
Sure. No, I love that. And the thing is, those little, like, you could wear a bracelet and somebody will notice, they'll compliment it. They'll notice it. Like, oh, I like your bracelet or your necklace. Like I'm very simple with my accessorization. I have like a bracelet with my kids' names engraved on it and necklaces with certain things that mean things to me. Again, it's like, if someone compliments it, then it's like, oh, thanks. This means something to me because, or like if someone likes earrings or sunglasses or whatever, it's like you have a tie to it. For me, I enjoy that for me because then if it, same thing with like my tattoos or whatever, like they mean something to me. So it calls that out. But I think knowing that you can take a chance and it's okay as long as you're like just having fun with it. I think that's a thing too, because I know a lot of people that are in their 20s, even early 30s, that the second they get home, it's like pajamas.
Yeah.
Or if they're out in public, which is a huge thing. My mom would crucify all these people when I was a kid. It's like, if she always said, if you're in so much pain you can't wear pants with a zipper, then you're not going to school. That's what my mom always told me. So never wore sweatpants, always had jeans, or at least like jeans and a t-shirt. And I'd go in college, I would go to class in jeans and like what I'm wearing today, jeans and a t-shirt. People were like, you got a presentation, you're pretty dressed up. And I'm like, I'm literally wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt. This is not dressed up. This is just my normal day. So,
well, in Iowa, it's funny because you go to an event and it's just so random because you'll get all of the things. It's like a formal event. You'll see some people wearing like the ball gown and then someone else is like jeans and a t-shirt.
Yep.
And you're like, same event.
Yep. Or like at homecoming. That's always a fun one for high schools. You got some people in a full suit. Some kids are wearing like a ball cap and boots. It just, if it's part of your style and your personality, then go for it. I
think
suppose.
Go for it. You know, there is an occasion for anything, but it just comes down to being comfortable in yourself and caring. And I do think personal grooming, personal style in any situation, it's also a reflection of your self-dignity and worth. It doesn't have to always be that. But when you see someone who shows up and they look good and they've dressed up a bit, you know they took the time, you know that they value your time, that they value – there's a level of trust that we kind of feel compared to when someone just shows up, you know, and there's a time and a place for everything. I'm not a by my nature someone who's a very rules-based person. More about what's the point. So whatever point you're trying to make or goal you're trying to accomplish, styling needs to fit within that.
Sure. No, I love that. I think it's and that's the conclusion of the lightning round. No more crazy questions, but I think that's really the personal branding ties in so much to marketing. You see so many brands that are huge. Who owns the company? You don't know. So there are some people that are very strategic about their personal brand that's separate from the company, and it helps fuel the company, but then also themselves, because then you get a face with the brand. It's like there's something behind it. So I think that helps a lot too. When you're working with these people in the personal styling side, what have been some of the positive outcomes with you put together a look or color palette, like, hey, these colors look great with your skin tone, whatever. What have been some of the responses to them, whether it's from the stage or when they're in meetings or whatever they're doing day to day?
Well, especially for the ones who were on stage, they're like, I got all the photos. I mean, they were tagged the most. People wanted the selfie with them. Like, they stood out because they looked amazing, memorable. Sure. Memorable is a huge component of it. For those, though, it's not just for people who want to become famous or who are on stage that I help, though. There's anyone I've helped. I've done workshops on it. I've done all the things. And what's really cool is to see how when a lot of people just lack the confidence, the knowledge, you know, when they're suddenly like, oh, I never would have worn that color, but I see what you're saying. It brings out my eyes or it makes my complexion look nicer. Or you might even have the same people with the same color palettes, but their personality is completely different. And a lot of it comes down to textures and patterns. Anyone, whether you're a man or a woman, to feel like you look your best, that you feel attractive. Man, when you feel attractive, you are attractive. You know, people who think they're not attractive aren't attractive. You know, it's a mindset thing more than even a physical thing. And that's, you know, one thing I'll say, like growing up in Panama is a very is a melting pot. So you have a lot of Caribbean, a lot of indigenous, a lot of Spanish, a lot of variety of cultures. But a lot of my Caribbean friends in Panama, you know, their moms they're Black women, some a little overweight, big thighs, and very beautiful women, but they carry themselves with confidence. They'll dress and they'll wear the colors and they're just doing their thing and strutting around. And you'll find other women, like here in the U.S., same size, kind of similar body type. They're like, I could never do that.
Sure.
I just need to wear my sweatpants, and it comes down to a confidence thing. And I'm stereotyping like crazy there, people, so please don't judge. But just as an example,
sure,
it's not about your weight so much. Yes, we want to be healthy. And it's not necessarily about projecting. It's about you loving yourself enough to wear those things.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. I think it's interesting though, just because perception is reality. If you walk into a room and you have kind of your chin's held high, you're dressed well, you're well groomed, you speak clearly, like people notice that. And whether you are that commanding CEO personality or if that's who you're trying to come across, people assume you are. If you come in and treat people like that, then that people notice. I think that's a big piece of it too. And if you are this kind of like reclusive personality, and then you get on stage and you're wearing a clown costume and you don't feel confident in it, but you look good, but you don't feel good, that also can be like tank, because again, people see through that. Like your BS meter is pretty sensitive anymore. You can notice these things, So I think that's a big piece of it.
And there's functionality part of it. Like what I wore today, I'm wearing a vest that if I was standing up, this would be no problem. But I wore this and I'm sitting down and it's too tight.
Sure.
And I'm literally was like sweating and like couldn't breathe.
Your diaphragm's restricted.
So I'm like, obviously this is not a good outfit to wear for a podcast if I'm sitting.
Sure.
And so there's a practical component to it as well. I've seen numerous times where I'm sure you have as well, where you're seeing people, they're constantly fidgeting, they're constantly adjusting their blouse or their shirt, or maybe for women, they wear the V-neck down too much. It was fine, but then the fabric starts to droop, and now they're feeling self-conscious because they don't want
cleavage.
Too much cleavage.
Yes.
And so they're constantly adjusting it. Well, that's a distraction, sure. and it kind of makes you go like, why did you wear that shirt?
Sure.
And again, wardrobe malfunction. All the things. Again, it comes down to you just being super comfortable in your skin. And with men, there's that saying back in the day, like you're comfortable in a suit, and basically you see these men who wear suits all the time. They walk with ease, like James Bond, who can run with the suit and tackle people and shoot. Like how realistic is that? But he looks very comfortable in a suit. I hate wearing suits. I am not a suit guy. I will wear them on occasion if I need to. Yep. But I'm just like this the whole time.
Right. Well, and then like I bought a suit tailored for my wedding, and it's so different when you have it tailored to your body, and it's like, well, now I get like. Then you look in the mirror, you're like, dang, this looks good. Like it's not drooping at the shoulders, it's not too tight, it doesn't look like you stole it from your grandpa's closet. This is cool. So I think that's part of it too.
It is part of it. And my wedding, I wore a Indian from India, very loose fitting shirt, white scarf, and some khaki slacks, and was barefoot.
Whatever you're comfortable in.
We were like the hippiest of weddings. I'll just say that.
Sure, that's great. I don't want to keep you here all day. I know you got places to be. I have one really big thing I wanted to hit home with you is as you were going through these transition periods. So we mentioned cancer the second time, and you moved to the States. And when you're to this point where we're making this change in the companies and starting to branch and being your true self, what was kind of your mindset when you have to look yourself in the mirror and be like, I have to change who I am? What was kind of the things going through your head? We'll start with the second cancer thing when you're in the Mayo Clinic. When you're like, we have to move away from Hawaii, I have to become this different person. Like, what were some of the things going through your head in those instances in your life where you had to change who you were to adapt and become a new person?
So at that point, I don't know if I was changing who I was, because it was more like circumstantial. What really mattered to me was I don't want to leave my daughters without their father, my wife without her husband. That's what mattered. It wasn't even so much about me. It was the potential risk that I could die. Cancer is a scary word for a lot of people. It's less scary for me now, having been through it a few times. But that was probably more it than anything. And you do realize in those moments what really matters. It was, in that moment, it was the identity of me as a husband and a father. That's what mattered. I think third thing that mattered was, what was my legacy? What was I leaving behind? Not just for my wife and kids, but for society. I've oftentimes said that we maybe live to be 90, 95, 96. I don't even know, nowadays. I'm 37. So every day that goes by is a day spent. Spend it well. We also, for better or for worse, have to spend our days working. So at least 5 days a week. So at least get some joy and satisfaction out of your work and your time. Beyond that, though, I think the whole element of legacy, leaving an inheritance, not just for our kids and our family, but for society at large is really important. That we made it better. We served a purpose. Whether that purpose is making awesome videos for businesses or that purpose is personal brand coaching and styling people, which is so funny. It doesn't matter. If you are helping people and you're having a great time and you're making a difference and you can come home not stressed and enjoy your kids, enjoy your spouse, enjoy your loved ones, whatever situation you're in, and feel satisfied, at rest, not constantly in a state of stress, anxiety, overwhelm, dissatisfaction, you've hit on something really important. Very few people get there. And I really want to help people find that meaning, that identity, and that purpose, because life is short and it can be taken away like that. Sickness is a real thing. And it's not a fear tactic. It's not a fear thing, but it is a sobering reality that we only get a certain amount of time in this life to live and use it to the fullest, suck the marrow out of it, live it.
God, I love that. Put that on a bumper sticker. Yeah. That's great. I love that so much. For people that are wanting to learn more about you, your services, where's the best place they can find you online?
DavidAllenTracy.com. So David, ALLEN, TRACY, like Dick Tracy, no E before the Y.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll put all the links to everything below. Thanks again so much for being on the show. I mean, there's so much. We'll probably have to have a part 2 at some point down the road because there's so many with all the different businesses we didn't even get to talk about today. Yeah. So thanks again for being on the show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, if you made it this far in the show, you know what to do. Make sure to give us a 5-star review if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. And make sure to tune in next week for another interview. My name is Ryan Snaadt. It rhymes with odd, and you're listening to the Rhymes with Odd podcast. Peace.